Well, hello and good morning. It is Thursday, and today we're talking about what are we talking about today? Reading in nursing school. Sorry. And Oliver is here. Hang on one second. He's going to meow if I don't pick him up. And I don't want him to disturb everybody. Okay. So we're talking about all the reading in nursing school on day 6 of our mindset edit. So yay, wonderful. I've got some notes over here and we'll be going through this. So if somebody can give a quick thumbs up to let me know that you can hear me, that would be super helpful, or that you heard Oliver, that would be super helpful. And what I will start off by saying is that thank you for that. Thank you for that confirmation. I'll start off by saying that the reading in nursing school is a giant burden. It really is. Like my med-surg textbook, I'm not going to lie, was that thick. And that was one of, I think, 6 classes that I had my very first semester. So even just looking at all your books can feel like a burden. And then when you get your reading assignments, it really can be overwhelming. It's almost impossible to do all of that reading. If you were to sit down and do all of that reading, there's a really good chance that you wouldn't have time to do a lot of your other homework, assignments, studying, papers, projects, clinical prep work, case studies, care plans, whatever, okay? So it's a disproportionate amount of work compared to the rest of your obligations in nursing school. Okay, so a few comments. We have, thanks for doing this every morning. You're very welcome. And everybody says we can hear me, and cute cat. Yes, Oliver is very cute. So an interesting thing about the reading in nursing school that I learned when I was in graduate school is that they know it's too much reading. I just got some weird warning on my computer. They know it's too much reading. So as I was taking these classes, they would talk about the undergraduate nursing program and how they're kind of obligated to tell you the reading that is for the topic that you're studying, right? It's all part of their accreditation and the evaluation of the school. They have to assign this reading. They know it's too much. They know nobody can do that. So we're going to talk about why you should let go of your guilt for not doing all the reading or feeling like you can. Like if you can't keep up with all the reading, you're not a failure. You're absolutely not a failure. We're going to talk about 3 ways to use your textbooks today. And it'll be pretty quick. I have to jam off to work again this morning, so we'll be pretty quick with this. Now, one caveat I would say, if you are a very fast reader, and if this is 100% the best way that you learn, you have excellent recall, excellent reading comprehension, you read it, it goes into your head, it stays in your head, then reading is probably best for you. That's very few students, okay? That's very few students. So the goal with nursing school, with all your homework you're studying, is to make better use of your time and stay engaged with more active learning. And for a lot of students, reading can be very passive. So we want to be a little bit more engaged and a little bit more active with our learning. So 3 ways we're going to use our textbooks, 3 options. 1 is to use it only as a reference. 1 is to do like a preview before lecture and then use it as a reference after. And then 3 is to outline it with your classmates. Okay, so we'll talk about each one of these. And TS says, I'm going through this right now, so thank you. Well, you're very welcome. I'm very glad. I hope this is helpful for you. All right, so the very first option is to just use your textbook as a reference book. This works if your instructors are some instructors will write their own exam questions, and some instructors will pull questions from the book publisher's test bank. If you've got an instructor who's pulling all their questions for your exam from the publisher, those questions are going to be in the book. We'll talk about how to survive that in just a moment when we get to that 3rd option. But if your instructors are writing their own questions, you're probably pretty safe in assuming that their questions are going to come from lecture and the things that they deem important, that they pull out. Here's a great tip. You can always ask a student who's ahead of you a semester or 2, if the instructor's exams pull from lecture mainly or pull from the book mainly. And most of the time, they'll be happy to share that information with you. So if the instructor is, excuse me, pulling test questions from lecture, from your homework, all those things that you're actively engaged in, then you could possibly just use your textbook as a reference. So say you come across a concept that you don't fully understand, where do you go and find more information about that concept? I would say the first place to go is your textbook. Look it up, read that one section about whatever it is. Pleural effusions, which just happens to be the topic I talk about on the podcast today. You don't understand pleural effusions, go to your textbook and read about pleural effusions. Okay, so using it as like you would, instead of Googling it and getting sucked into that rabbit hole, right? Just go to your textbook and use it in that way. Okay, so that's the first way. The second way is the way that I recommend using it is to skim before class and then use it to fill in the holes after class. So the process that I teach students in my boot camp, my Crucial Concepts boot camp, is to go into their book and skim it before lecture or before they do an online module or before you go into a sim or whatever it is. And then, so to skim properly, okay, it's not just speed reading, that's something else completely. Skimming means you're actively seeking out key information. You want to get an overview, like a introduction to the topic, okay? So read the introduction if there is one. It's usually going to be a paragraph or so. Read that introduction. It's going to give you an overview. And then read those subject headers. Now, what I would say is if your background in physiology or pathophysiology is a little not your strong point, read the paragraph that explains the pathophysiology. Because honestly, all the interventions that you're doing, all the assessments that you're doing, everything that you're watching for in this patient stems from the pathophysiology. And your goal is normal physiology. So know normal physiology and know the pathophysiology of that disease condition. So you're reading the introduction, you're reading any patho, you're reading the subject headers, and that will just give you an idea of, oh, this section has information that I want to dive into. As you're skimming, if you read a subject header and it lights you up and you're intrigued by what it says, guess what? Keep reading. That's a sign that you're engaged, okay? That the neurons are firing, that reading this information now and this particular information is going to be helpful for you. But if you read the subject header and it doesn't light you up, keep going. Make note of it, but keep going. You want to pay very close attention to anything that the author and publisher have deemed super important. And they make this really easy. They pull it out into charts. They pull it out into diagrams and graphs and photographs and drawings and lists and boxes and bold text and bulleted text and bigger text. Like those things are absolutely vital. So pay very close attention to them. And then read the chapter summary. If there's a chapter summary, read that summary. So that is how you're going to skim before you go to lecture. So that now when you're sitting in lecture, you're not hearing these concepts, these words for the very first time. When you hear something for the very first time, there's extra processing that's going on in your brain. And sometimes if you're busy over here processing a new term or a new concept that the instructor just said, guess what? You're not hearing the next thing that they said, right? You've probably experienced that in class. So when you have a little bit of that background knowledge, that foundation, when you go to lecture, you're able to get more out of it, so much more out of it. So the other thing I would say to this is, and I know it's hard when you're brand new to think like a nurse and study like a nurse and read like a nurse, which is why I teach you how to do all this in boot camp, because it's so important. And your instructors are going to say to you probably in your first couple of weeks, I want you to think like a nurse. And you're probably thinking, I've been in nursing school for 2 weeks. I don't know how to think like a nurse. But what they're getting at is focus in on the things a nurse needs to know. And we're going to talk about this more in an upcoming session. But you're looking at shifting how you think about things. Nurses are problem solvers. So if you didn't know what a nurse does, that's what nurses do. That's your job. You look for problems that the patient has or could be having, and you find solutions and you do things to solve those problems. So be thinking about that in that framework, that mindset as you're reading. So what do I mean by that? The patient has a problem. Those are the signs and symptoms, right? They have a cough. They have a dropping oxygen saturation level with their pleural effusion. What are you going to do about that? Well, maybe let's supply some oxygen, maybe let's sit them upright, help them get better lung expansion. Problems, solutions. So be thinking in that framework, in that mindset, paying also close attention to things like medications and other, maybe like tests that are used to evaluate a patient with this condition. And then when you're looking at that chapter summary, if that chapter summary has practice questions, do those practice questions. Even though you haven't read the whole chapter, that's okay. Do them anyway. See if you get the answer right, and then read the rationale. Read the correct answer rationale and why the wrong answers are wrong. Those rationales as well. And they'll be very, very helpful for you. Okay, so that's how you can skim before class. And then you go to lecture and you listen to the lecture. And then I always encourage students to rewrite their notes. I get a lot of pushback on this because nobody thinks they have time. But rewriting your notes is actually one of the absolute very, very, very best ways that you can integrate everything that you've learned and make it in your own words, your own thought processes, the way that you think. It's really, really beneficial. But you'll have gaps in your knowledge as you do this, as you go back and review your notes. Guess what? Pull out your textbook to fill in those gaps, okay? And, oh, hang on one second, you guys. I'm going to mute for just one second. Sorry, someone just came into my house. I wanted to let them know I was here. And then the third option, let's say you've got an instructor like my mental health professor. I'm pretty sure she just got the questions from the publisher. So her entire exam was probably 80% straight from the book. And I tell you, none of us wanted to read that textbook. We didn't have time to read that textbook. So we formed a reading group basically, and I believe there were maybe a dozen students in this group, maybe 8, maybe a dozen, I forget. It was super easy to find people that wanted to participate because it made such a massive difference. And we assigned each person a chapter, and I believe each person probably got 2 or 3 chapters, because there were maybe, if there were 12 of us and there were 48 chapters in the book, each person got to do 2, right? And what that person would do is they would make an outline of that chapter. So just pulling out the key bullet points. So what was, a 40-page chapter in that tiny little text became a 5 or 6-page outline. And this was a fantastic, this was one of my best kept secrets in nursing school. This was amazing. Absolutely amazing. So the key with doing it this way is you've got to choose people that you trust, that are going to follow through and get their outline done on time. And we never had any issues with that. And that will take good outline notes. And it was just absolutely fantastic. So I only read 2 chapters of my mental health book. The rest of it, I used the outlines that my classmates and I made together. So that sums it up. Those are the 3 ways that you can use your textbooks without having to feel like you have to sit and read every single word. So the first one was to just use it as a reference when you come up against something that you don't fully understand. Maybe you're doing some NCLEX practice questions and you're missing all of the ones about whatever, pleural effusions. Go back and read that section on pleural effusions. The second way was to skim ahead of time, paying close attention to the chapter, the introduction, the called out items, the bold text, the charts, the diagrams, the lists, all of that stuff, and then using it afterwards to fill in the gaps as you go back through and review your notes after lecture. And then the third way is to actually make outlines of the chapters. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit about the reading in nursing school and how you could actually get the information from your book without having to read every single thing, okay? Are there any questions about this? Let me know. Otherwise, I am going to hustle off to work and hopefully have a great day. It's been super busy in the PACU lately after the July 4th holiday. Now all the surgeries that didn't happen because the holiday are happening this week. So it's been a little bit bonkers. So they actually called me to come in early today, which is why I'm jetting out of here in a few minutes. So, okay, doesn't look like there's any questions. You can always add them in the comments. I'll see them later tomorrow morning before I go to work tomorrow. And then tomorrow we're talking about some attitude adjustments that are really helpful to make before you start nursing school. Just kind of taking that shift from a pre-nursing student and going into being a full-fledged nursing student. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, bye everybody. Have a fantastic day.